There's Rosemary.
Hello.
So are we expecting anybody else?
No, that should be everybody.
Okay, so are we good to start? I've got 3:01.
We are good to start, yes.
Okay, so Jim had an emergency and is out of town, so I will be running today's meeting. And so I would like to call this meeting to order. And the first thing on our agenda is discussing some of the phases of some return to service at the library. So Sarah, if you could share that.
Sure. So Kareem graciously gave me his cell phone number, which he may regret. And we've been sort of all over the place this week, but I do feel very good about this plan that we have for curbside, as does Kareem. And based on all the various guidelines that are out now, there has been some question in the library world as to what category we fall into. So I have talked to Kareem even today, and we are good to have our staff returning to work in the building, with the limited teams that I had described before, starting on Monday. So we can start answering the phones on Monday. And then we will start our curbside service on May 12th, provided that there is no new information that would stop us from doing that. But I'm feeling pretty confident because Kareem felt pretty good about that as well. We will unlock our book drop on Monday also. Returned materials will be handled with gloves and placed in a 72-hour quarantine based on all the best information we have. And again, what Kareem is comfortable with us doing there as well. We will also start curbside service at the branch, same time frame for them as well. We're only going to offer that 3 days a week there. Again, we're working in set teams, and that's what we'll work with the hours we've got available, I think, for the staff. And I think that should be plenty to handle the curbside for the branch. We'll keep doing all of our virtual programming. They've added very recently a Facebook book discussion and a team takeover page on Facebook. So the staff continue to innovate there as to what they're doing for our patrons, and I'm very proud of them. We do have the 3 teams that we're going to stick to reasonably closely in terms of who's allowed in the building at any given time. But like tech services is pretty far away from everyone. So those staff may be in on days that aren't their assigned days, so they can work in their offices. And there'll just be a little of that going on based on where people work and what makes sense to still try to keep staff divided. But after talking to Kareem, I don't think that a staff case of COVID-19 would completely shut down a team. When they're doing that contact tracing, they're really looking for people in very close contact, like someone you live with. And with the various protections that we have in place here to separate our staff, to wear masks, the frequent hand washing, we should be reasonably safe. Can't say that there wouldn't be exceptions. If Ron or I were to get sick, I imagine the other one would fail the contact tracing test. We're still mastering the use of our masks as we run back and forth across offices here, and we handle a lot of the same items. We're passing papers back and forth all the time. I think those things could be a factor, but generally speaking, I think we should be in good shape to start staff in the building Monday and curbside on the 12th.
Good.
Phase 2, I don't really have a whole lot of new information beyond what was shared in your board packet. We're potentially going to close the genealogy department just because of the nature of how it's used. And periodicals will be moved out of that room so that we can have a second circ work room to spread out our staff. We're still working on all the traffic flow and the plexiglass and those sort of measures. While we're here for curbside, will really give us an opportunity to get those things set up. So we're ready to go whenever it is advisable to allow patrons back in the building. I do not yet have for you a firm number of how many people should be in the building at any given time. I'm sure you've seen when you've entered a public building, the occupancy listed somewhere. I can't find it anywhere in the library, and James can't find it on our building plans either. So he's actually called Wood County building inspectors to check what that number is. I'm sure we have it somewhere in a file somewhere here, but we just haven't been able to put our hands on it quickly. Regardless, that's really just sort of for our and your information. what the governor's advice has said is 50% of your building occupancy. Well, we know that the Lindenwood room occupancy is 144. So 50% of that would still be far too many people to have in the Lindenwood room and be able to social distance. I can imagine whatever number it is for the whole library, 50% of that is probably still too many people to be able to really have all these other measures in place. So we'll probably be looking at something much smaller than the maximum we could allow. And I think that's all I specifically wanted to mention to you, but any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Sounds like you got a lot of details worked out.
Yep, nope, that sounds fabulous, and we appreciate your planning on that end. So the next thing on our agenda is to consider some COVID-19 related policy, procedures, and forms. So I don't know if we want to take this as a group and talk about it, or take each document at a time.
I'd take them as a group personally.
Okay. And I did have a couple of questions, if it's okay if I start. On page 4 of our packet, which is actually the COVID-19 employee screening procedures. In the 3rd paragraph, it talks about each employee will be screened privately by the manager on duty.
Yes.
And it just talks about that, but I wondered what extra protection the manager would be provided. Obviously they would have a mask, but I know from other offices that have had to do this, they have to wear protective eye gear as well as gloves.
We do not have gloves or protective eye gear. We were just going masks. Ours are touchless thermometers. They just have to get within an inch or so of your forehead to read the temperature. But certainly if you want more protection, we can do that. It may delay our date getting staff back in the building as we order that. But whatever you are most comfortable with, we're happy to go with.
I just want to make sure we protect the managers that are doing this.
Courtney, are you able to weigh in with anything you've seen from other the webinars you've watched?
Sure. I haven't heard anything about having to provide staff who are administering those health screenings with any further protective measures. Not to say that it wouldn't be a good idea to do so, but like Sarah said, I'm sure it would push us back a little bit. So that's at your discretion. But personally, I haven't seen anything that would recommend that or suggest that that was something that needed to be in place prior to starting back.
I think gloves would be reasonably easy for us. I think we've got some gloves on hand, but I'm not sure that we have the protective eyewear.
How many would you need?
6. We've got 6 different managers who would be doing this.
I think the gloves, minimally the gloves would be a great idea. When you're, being so close to someone's face, just someone breathing on you.
Then you get into the question, do they change gloves with every person coming in?
That has really been something that we've thought carefully about in gloves. Gloves are going to be important for the return material, but we are not planning on them other places. And Kareem had been comfortable with that because the frequent hand washing and hand sanitizing is likely as effective, if not more effective. And you're right, you cross-contaminate very quickly with gloves.
Okay.
To sanitize your hands in between may be better.
Well, that's what I had seen even with respect to going to the grocery store. Customers were wearing gloves into the grocery stores and so forth, but then you're touching everything and you touch your phone, you touch your face, and everything's cross-contaminated. So that's why I wondered.
I think for the managers, I think we should at least provide the gloves.
Okay, we will get the gloves. And I will check in with Kareem on the procedures he wants us to follow with those. I assume he'll want them changed between each person. So that'll be a substantial amount of gloves that we'll need to work on. And
there was another section, I'm just trying to find it, that I had a question on.
Ellen, can you clarify, like, then the next page, is that just done once, that screening or self-declaration by the employee? Is that done once or after, or if they've had an issue?
That's done every day when they come into work.
Every day they're signing off on that.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
And those forms will be kept by Courtney. They don't go in the personnel files. They'll go in a separate COVID-19 file that she'll keep.
That's really thorough. That's great.
Mhm.
And I think it'll be important that we notify anybody that an individual has issues with this. It won't be held against them for any other actions. If they are really uncomfortable with this.
Oh,
that
yeah.
The managers will have to deal with people because we don't want them to feel that they're being made to do something.
Yeah, we've had conversations with the staff already, making sure they're aware this will be part of the procedures as they come in, and it's to protect everyone. And this information, is just simply for our COVID-19 files and protections, and it has nothing to do with your personnel or anything otherwise.
My other question from this pack of materials is on page 6, and it's about the universal face covering.
Mhm.
So in the second paragraph, it kind of talks about the guidelines of wearing a cloth face covering. Do we need to outline any procedure if you have someone who says they can't wear one, refuse to wear one, something like that that might happen?
So there could be a couple instances where it's not advised to wear one, like a medical condition, in which case we have to have documentation. And that's just something that's come out of the governor's office as well, on their best practices for businesses. Employers should require all their employees to wear a face covering unless, there are some industries, like food industries, where it conflicts with other safety guidelines. But I think the only one that really applies to us is if you have a medical condition that would preclude wearing a face covering, and then we have to have documentation as
Right.
to why we have a staff member not wearing it.
And would that person, if they were in that situation, would they be maybe placed in a situation where they weren't exposed to other people?
Yes, we would certainly do our best to put them in a work scenario where they are very secluded.
Okay. And then my other thing is there's been a few more. I know the most common symptoms are listed here of COVID-19, but I think that there are a couple things that might want to be added there because it has fever, cough, or shortness of breath.
Mhm.
So one of the other symptoms right now is can't taste or smell,
Mhm.
and the other is a sore throat. So I don't know if you want to add those or not.
We can certainly add those. You're still on the universal face covering and just adding additional symptoms of loss of taste or smell
Mm-hmm.
and sore throat.
Yes.
We can add both of those. Courtney may have in fact had them in at one point, and we were trying to be consistent with our various symptoms listed on everything here.
Well, and I understand that completely. And as everyone knows, we're all dealing with this in our workplace and it changes on a daily basis. So that's just the most recent information I have.
Okay, we will add that into this universal face covering policy as additional symptoms.
Those are all the questions I had on those policies, procedures, and forms. So I don't know if other board members have anything.
No, I don't think so. I think it's gonna be pretty well covered.
No, I thought it was very comprehensive.
Yes.
Generally, if we're bringing you policies and procedures like this, I would have liked to have had them reviewed by the prosecutor's office or OLC, but things are moving very quickly now. So these were developed from SHRM and the Employers Association resources. OLC doesn't have their samples ready yet, and the prosecutor's office has not been able to get back with me either on any samples. So I won't, I reserve the right to bring to you some changes that we might need to ask for your approval on these, but based on the information we have now, I think these
Absolutely. Yep. So we would need a motion to approve these.
I'll move.
I'll
Second.
second.
And then we'll do a roll call for vote.
Mr. Casey,
Yes.
Mrs. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Dr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rooker.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate your review and your assistance with those. And I would also like to commend Courtney. She has done a tremendous amount of work here as our new HR manager, has been learning very, very quickly on the job. So we're very grateful to have her.
Yes. Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
So at this time, we do need to move into an executive session. So if I could have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Casey,
Yes.
Mrs. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
yes.
Dr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rooker.
Yes.
Okay, so Courtney, we'll be sending you an invitation to the executive session here. It should pop up in your screen shortly.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, Jerry, you'll just click. Oh, good, you made it.
Oh, and then you need to, let's see,
I think
I
you're up.
think we have, do we have everybody?
Here comes Jerry.
Okay.
I'm back.
okay. Whew.
Are we missing anyone?
Heather, I had told could log off when we went to
Okay.
the executive session.
Okay. So I would move that we move out of executive session.
Second,
Second.
Sorry, just making my notes here. Mrs. Rooker,
Aye.
Mrs. Flanagan,
yes.
Dr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Case.
Yes.
Okay, after being in executive session, we are going to make a few motions, and we certainly understand that this is a difficult time for everyone with COVID-19, and we're trying to make the best decisions for everyone involved. And I think that we have come up with a good plan here. At this time, we are making a motion to authorize the director and fiscal officer to complete an application with Shared Work Ohio to start on May 10th.
I'll second,
Mrs. Rooker,
Yes.
Mrs. Flanagan,
yes.
Dr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Casey.
Yes.
Thank you. We will do that application this evening after this meeting ends.
Good. I'd like to make the motion to reduce the director's salary by 10% for the remainder of 2020.
I'll second.
Mrs. Rooker,
Yes.
Mrs. Flanagan,
Yes.
Dr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Casey.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then I am making a motion to continue to pay staff for their regularly scheduled hours through May 9th. And then effective May 10th, make the following adjustments to payroll. Reduce full-time staff schedules by 10%. These reduced hours should be filled with a combination of in-library and telework hours. Staff may continue to use paid time off as allowed under library policy. Reduce scheduled hours for part-time staff to meet the library's current needs. Generally, that will be a 50% reduction in scheduled hours. Exceptions to the 50% reduction include the facilities staff and the Read for Life administrator social media coordinator. Part-time staff will be paid according to their scheduled and completed work hours. And the board will continue to reevaluate this. COVID-19 is a fluid situation and changing daily. So the board will reevaluate the needed staff hours as regularly scheduled monthly board meetings based on current operating needs and budget considerations.
And I apologize, Dr. McIntosh. Can you please consider adding to your motion that also the full-time facilities are accepted from their 10% reduction?
Yes.
I'll second.
One moment. Mrs. Rooker,
Yes.
Mrs. Flanagan,
Yes.
Dr. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Casey.
Yes.
Thank you. I know that was a difficult decision for you, and it was a difficult decision for us to make that recommendation.
Yes, and we certainly understand this is a difficult time for everyone. I think the only decision we have left is our next meeting.
So your next regularly scheduled board meeting would be the second Tuesday in May, and that would be May 12th. We do have some just regular library business that we have put on hold. So I would appreciate if you would go ahead and have a regular meeting. We are still allowed to do them in this Zoom format if you would like to make it another Zoom meeting.
Yes.
As long as I have my wife to make sure I can get signed on correctly, we're in good shape.
All right, well, we welcome guests.
She leaves, she's not listening.
Could we go back to the 4:30 time?
Yes, we can do that at the regular time.
Thank you.
Roger, does that work for you?
Yes.
And
I'm
Karen?
flexible.
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully everyone already still had that on their calendars.
Yes.
May 12th at 4:30.
May 12th at 4:30. We'll send you login instructions for that one again. I expect a slightly longer typical board packet. There are some items that we would have done at a normal April board meeting, and we didn't have a regular meeting there. So I'll do additional things for you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'd take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
I guess second, or just leave the meeting.
I'm gone.
Thank you all for your time today.
Yes,
you all.
thanks.
You,
Thank
care,
Sarah,
everyone.
for all your hard work.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah.
I appreciate your guidance in this.
Yeah, it's not been easy. Thank you.
See you all later.
All righty, thanks.
Let's see. Leave meeting.